All right, so ready to dive into some history. Today, we're heading straight into World War I. And our guides for this deep dive
Ooh, guides. Nice.
are two YouTube videos from the channel Oversimplified. They're titled WW1 Oversimplified, Part 1, and obviously Part 2.
Makes sense.
And I'm really excited to see what we find out about, well, I mean, this was a huge turning point.
Yeah, for like the whole world.
Exactly. We'll look at everything from like the insane events that started it all the way to how it impacted the 20th century.
You know, it's interesting because we often think of World War I as this sudden explosion, but Europe in 1914 was already a powder keg, just waiting to blow.
Yeah, the videos really captured that tension, that feeling. It's like everyone was just waiting for something, just one thing to tip the scales. Like, take France. They were still, you know, kind of sore from their defeat in the Franco-Prussian War.
Oh, decades earlier, right?
Yeah, decades earlier. So they were ready for payback, and they wanted that lost territory back.
Then you've got Germany, a newly unified Germany, bursting with industrial and military might. They wanted to show everyone they were a major power.
Which made the other guys nervous. Especially Great Britain.
Oh, definitely. And then you've also got these crumbling empires, like Austria-Hungary and the Ottomans, struggling to keep all these different ethnicities and nationalist movements together.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Seriously. It's amazing how all these internal pressures got tangled up with all the international rivalries. And then on top of all of that, you've got this incredibly complex web of alliances.
Right. Like, all these treaties and agreements meant that even a small conflict, like between two nations, could end up dragging like half of Europe into a war.
Domino effect.
Exactly. And it's chilling to think about how this one event, this seemingly unimportant event, could completely change history.
You're talking about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Yes. The heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne.
Assassinated by a Serbian nationalist.
It wasn't just a political act. It was like a domino that set off a chain reaction. Nobody could have predicted what would happen. And the videos highlight all the crazy events that led up to the assassination. Like the published route, that missed bomb, the driver taking a wrong turn, and bam, suddenly the world is on the brink of war.
It's wild. So then Austria-Hungary, with Germany backing them up, they gave Serbia an ultimatum.
Oh, one of those take it or leave it kind of ultimatums.
Exactly. They pretty much designed it so that Serbia would have to say no.
Which, of course, is exactly what happened.
Well, yeah, Serbia's refusal.
Yeah.
Combined with Austria-Hungary being convinced that the Serbian government was involved in the assassination plot, that led straight to war.
And that's when those dominoes really start falling. Russia, because of a treaty to protect Serbia, mobilized against both Austria-Hungary and Germany.
So Germany, naturally, declared war on Russia, and on France too, knowing they'd back up Russia.
So this is where Germany's Schlieffen Plan comes in.
Right, their big strategy. Knock out France quickly by marching right through neutral Belgium. The goal was to get a win in the West before Russia's massive army could get going.
It was incredibly risky looking back, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. The plan was based on some big assumptions that turned out to be completely wrong. They thought Belgium would be a pushover and that their own mobilization would be lightning fast. It's a perfect example of how rigid military planning can completely backfire. Real-world events are unpredictable.
Well, Belgium definitely fought back,
Okay.
which gave the Allies some much-needed time. And Britain, well, they were furious that Germany just ignored Belgium's neutrality, so they declared war on Germany, too. It's crazy how this all happened in a matter of days.
It really is. And, you know, to add to all this chaos, there was a huge miscalculation about what war would even be like. Most of the military leaders were still stuck in the past, thinking about grand battles and cavalry charges and infantry advances.
A romantic vision of war.
Yeah, that was totally outdated. Technology had advanced so much. Machine guns, long-range artillery, poison gas. All of that made those old ideas obsolete.
Yeah, the videos do a good job of showing that contrast. Old tactics versus brutal new technology.
I mean, remember those images of the French soldiers?
Yeah.
Bright blue uniforms marching in formation.
They were basically targets.
Exactly. The French and other armies had to adapt, but that learning curve was incredibly costly.
The Western Front becomes a nightmare. Trench warfare. Millions of men dug into these trenches facing each other across this narrow strip of land. No man's land. Can you even imagine what it was like?
It was hell on earth. Constant shelling, rats, disease, the smell of death everywhere, and the constant fear, knowing that any second, a sniper or an artillery barrage could end your life.
It's hard to even comprehend.
And then neither side could break through.
Yeah.
They were stuck in this horrible back and forth. Every tiny bit of land gained cost thousands of lives.
It was a war of attrition, but it's hard to really grasp what that meant for the soldiers who were living it.
It's important to remember, too, that this war wasn't contained to Europe. It spread all over the globe, pulling in colonial populations and expanding into Africa, Asia, the Middle East.
It's so sad to think about the impact on those colonial populations, especially in Africa, forced to fight in a war that had nothing to do with them.
It really shows the dark side of European imperialism.
Absolutely. And then there's the Armenian genocide, perpetrated by the Ottoman Empire. It often gets overshadowed by the fighting in Europe, but over 1 million Armenians were systematically targeted and killed.
It's a horrific chapter of the war.
It makes you wonder if the scale of the conflict made these kinds of atrocities possible. It's hard to reconcile that with how optimistic people were at the beginning of the war.
Yeah, the war was quickly becoming far more brutal and complex than anyone could have imagined. And then new players entered the scene, each with their own goals and ambitions. Italy and Japan joined the fight, wanting territory and power for themselves,
adding even more layers to this already tangled mess.
Speaking of tangled, the Ottomans joining the war is interesting.
Right. The oversimplified videos tell this story about Ottoman spies who were sent to Afghanistan. They were supposed to cause trouble for the British in India, but they ended up getting bored, brewing their own alcohol and getting drunk.
I mean, I guess their mission failed.
It's a kind of dark, funny story, but it also shows how chance and human error can play a role, even in a massive conflict like this.
The Ottomans weren't even sure about joining the war, but they ended up doing it because of a bunch of events that were, to some extent, out of their control.
It seems like everyone was desperately trying to find a way to break the stalemate.
Yeah, but a lot of those efforts just led to more suffering and, crossing moral lines.
Which brings us to some of the darkest parts of the war. Unrestricted submarine warfare, the use of chemical weapons. It's a reminder of how quickly desperation can make people forget about morality.
So Germany, they were facing a naval blockade from Britain, and it was threatening their economy. So they decided to gamble on unrestricted submarine warfare.
Meaning they'd target any ship, even neutral ones.
If they thought they were carrying supplies to the Allies, yeah.
Which obviously brought them into conflict with the U.S.
Big time, especially with the sinking of the Lusitania.
A British passenger liner with Americans on board.
That was a huge turning point. Americans were outraged, and it started to shift public opinion toward getting involved in the war.
And then there's the chemical weapons. Both sides ended up using them, breaking pre-war agreements and unleashing this horrifying new type of warfare.
It's hard to imagine the terror of those first gas attacks.
It seems like the world was in shock. The conflict was becoming more and more barbaric.
And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Russia implodes. They were already dealing with internal problems and a struggling economy.
Oh, right. The Russian Revolution in 1917.
The Tsar was overthrown, the Bolsheviks took power, and Russia pulled out of the war.
That must have been a huge relief for Germany, at least for a little while.
It was short-lived. Germany saw their chance to focus everything on the Western Front, hoping to win before the Americans could fully mobilize. But they underestimated America.
And then there's the Zimmerman telegram.
Oh, man. That was a game changer.
This intercepted message from Germany to Mexico,
proposing an alliance against the U.S.
It was like pouring fuel on a fire.
It gave President Wilson exactly what he needed to declare war on Germany in April of 1917.
So American troops arrive with all their resources and industrial might, and the tide starts to turn in favor of the Allies.
The beginning of the end for Germany and the Central Powers.
Germany tried one last big push in 1918, a desperate attempt to break through Allied lines before all those American forces arrived.
It was a huge gamble.
Yeah.
And it failed badly. They were exhausted, outnumbered, and outgunned.
Pushed back on all fronts.
One by one, Germany's allies started to collapse. First Bulgaria, then the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary. Facing defeat everywhere, Germany finally surrendered November 11th, 1918, Armistice Day.
The fighting stopped, but the world was changed forever. The war's end wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a whole new set of challenges. It was the start of a new chapter.
Exactly. And that's what we'll get into next.
The story's just getting started.
Yeah. I mean, the fighting stopped, but that wasn't really the end. It was more like the start of a new chapter.
Yeah.
Filled with all sorts of new problems. You could say the real impact of World War I was just starting to spread.
It's like you close one incredibly violent, chaotic book, and then you open another. And this one is filled with uncertainty and the potential for even more upheaval.
Definitely. I mean, the war completely changed the map of Europe.
Right. Empires were shattered, new countries were formed, the old world order was completely gone.
And the victors, especially France and Great Britain, they were determined to punish Germany, make sure they could never attack again.
They wanted revenge, but also security. But did they succeed? I mean, that's still something historians debate.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Which brings us to the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Germany was hit with some serious penalties. They lost territory, had to pay huge war reparations, and they were severely limited in terms of their military.
So were those measures justified? Or did they actually create conditions that led to future conflict? Historians are still trying to figure that out. The Treaty of Versailles tried to address the victor's concerns, but it also caused a lot of resentment in Germany.
And it created economic hardship.
Exactly. And many people argue that. It set the stage for the rise of extremism, like Nazism, which obviously played a role in World War II.
It's that line from the Oversimplified videos that gets me. The world learned a lesson from the war and never had such an awful war again for about 20 years.
Oof. Dark humor, but it makes you think.
It really does. It shows how fragile the peace was and how flawed the solutions were.
The Treaty of Versailles addressed some of the symptoms, but it didn't deal with the underlying problems.
It didn't get to the root of the issues.
Right. It didn't fix the things that had contributed to the war in the first place. Nationalism, economic competition, and a lack of any good international systems for resolving conflict.
All those things were still simmering under the surface, just waiting for the right moment to erupt again.
And beyond the political consequences, there was the massive human cost of the war. We're talking millions of people dead, soldiers and civilians, entire generations wiped out.
It's hard to even comprehend the scale of the suffering.
And the psychological scars were deep, too. The horrors of trench warfare, the constant fear, and the grief of losing loved ones. It left a lot of people traumatized.
You can see that reflected in the art and literature, and even the philosophy that came out of that period.
There was a lot of disillusionment. People started questioning their values and beliefs.
The war didn't just destroy physical things, it also destroyed the intellectual and spiritual landscape of an entire generation.
And what about the economic impact? European economies were devastated.
Not just from the cost of fighting the war, but from all the destruction. Infrastructure, industries, and all the debt they incurred.
It was a huge financial burden.
And it wasn't just about money. The war also had major social consequences.
Both intentional and unintentional.
It sped up some changes that were already happening, like the changing role of women in society.
Right. Women took on really important jobs during the war, challenging traditional gender roles and helping to push forward the women's suffrage movement.
It feels like the war pushed the old world over the edge. It was already struggling. But the war just accelerated everything.
It wasn't just about empires and borders.
Mm-hmm.
It was about fundamental shifts in how society worked and what people believed.
And we can't forget about technology. The war really pushed innovation forward in areas like aviation, medicine, and communication.
Right. Driven by military necessity, of course. But those advancements ended up having a big impact on civilian life later on.
It's interesting how the war was this catalyst for both destruction and de-innovation.
I know, right? It shows that progress isn't always linear. Even the worst events can have unforeseen consequences.
So World War I was a turning point, no doubt about it. It destroyed empires, reshaped the world, and ushered in this era of uncertainty and rapid change.
An era of searching for meaning in a world that suddenly didn't make sense anymore.
It's such a complex event, full of contradictions. But it's also a story about resilience, about courage.
And the amazing ability of humans to rebuild and find hope, even in the face of incredible devastation.
But did all of this upheaval lead to progress? I mean, was the war to end all wars actually a step backward? It feels like we're balancing between advancement and despair.
And that's what makes World War I so interesting to study even today. It forces us to look at the darkest parts of humanity, but also at the incredible stories of bravery, sacrifice, and strength.
It makes us ask some tough questions about what progress really means, what causes conflict,
and what our responsibility is in creating a more peaceful future.
It's a story that still resonates with us, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The lessons of World War I are more relevant now than ever.
So what's the big takeaway for our listeners? What should they remember about World War I?
Well, first, remember that it wasn't just about trenches and battle. It was a clash between the old and the new.
It was a world on the brink of irreversible change. It really feels like World War I was that moment, when the old world, with its empires and old ways of fighting, just smashed into the modern world.
And that clash happened on so many levels, too.
Yeah.
You had these outdated military tactics going up against brand new technologies.
Right.
And that led to those horrific casualties.
Right.
But it was also a clash between the old world order and these new ideas about nationalism, self-determination, social change.
Yeah, like the war just sped up a change that was already starting to happen.
Exactly. It's like the world was a pot of water on the stove, and the war just turned up the heat until it boiled over.
And once it boils over, you can't exactly put it back the way it was, can you?
Nope. And that brings up a big question
Yeah.
that the oversimplified videos kind of leave us thinking about. Did World War I lead to progress, or did it actually set us back?
It's a tough question. It's not an easy answer.
No, it's not.
I mean, there's this complicated legacy, right? On the one hand, you've got amazing advancements in technology.
Yeah, aviation, medicine, communication, all those things leaped forward because of the war effort.
But then you have this unbelievable loss of life and this feeling of disillusionment and then the rise of those totalitarian ideologies. Right. That would lead to even more horrible things later on.
It's like the war unleashed both amazing potential and this wave of destruction.
Wow.
And I think it's up to every generation to deal with that legacy, to learn from the mistakes, but also try to use those advancements for good.
So why should we care about this war today? It ended over 100 years ago. It's not just about remembering dates and battles, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Understanding the past, especially something like World War I, is so important for how we deal with the present. It's a warning about the dangers of nationalism, about how fragile peace can be, and about the responsibility that comes with new technologies.
It's like we're looking in a mirror and seeing not just ourselves, but the echoes of the people who came before us.
Their choices and the consequences of those choices.
And it makes you realize that the choices we make now have the power to shape the future, too, for good or bad.
We're not just watching history happen. We're part of it.
I love that. We're not just studying history. We're shaping it. So what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember about World War I?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that history isn't just a bunch of facts and dates. It's made up of the choices and actions and experiences of real people.
Right.
And even though World War I was this huge event, it's ultimately a human story, a story about tragedy and resilience, about innovation and destruction.
And it's a story that's still being written, isn't it? The effects of World War I are all around us today.
In the way the world is organized, in the technology we use, and in the fight for peace and justice that's still going on.
The Oversimplified videos give us a good overview of the main events and people.
But they also leave us with a lot of questions.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, makes us want to learn more.
To dive deeper into the stories, the people, and the lessons.
That's what a deep dive is all about. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about understanding history in a way that helps us understand the world today and helps us make a difference.
It's about realizing that history isn't just something in the past.
It's a living force that shapes who we are and the choices we make for the future.
The more we understand the past,
the better equipped we are to face the challenges of today and build a more just and peaceful world.
So well said. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into World War I. I hope this conversation has inspired you to keep exploring, to learn more about the stories, the people, and the lessons of this incredible moment in history.
And remember, the learning doesn't stop here. There's always more to discover, more connections to make, and more insights to uncover.
We're going back in time to explore what led up to World War II. Our sources this time are a couple of oversimplified videos.
Yeah, these things are surprisingly detailed, really.
Right. You wouldn't think so from the animation style, the cartoons and all. But we're going to uncover some interesting stuff, I think.
I think so, too. Like, you might think you know all the basics of World War II, but I'm betting there are some things in here that you've never heard of before. And even if you have, it's just such a fascinating time period.
Absolutely. So where should we start?
Well, I think the best place to start is right after World War I. Europe was just like a total mess back then. Everyone was resentful, and there were all these unfulfilled ambitions. And out of all that chaos rose this new ideology.
Fascism.
Fascism. Right. So then we have Mussolini rising to power in Italy. It's crazy how he started out as a socialist. He was even against Italy joining World War I.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, he's a fascist dictator. Like, what happened there? Well, the thing about Mussolini is that he was really good at taking advantage of whatever anxieties were floating around at the time. Like, Italy felt totally cheated by the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
Their economy was in ruins. And on top of that, they were just longing for a strong leader, someone to restore their national pride, So Mussolini swooped in and promised to make Italy great again.
So it sounds like he wasn't always a fascist then.
Exactly. It was more like his ideology kind of evolved as things changed around him.
I see.
After the war, people were just so disillusioned, and they felt humiliated on the world stage.
Yeah.
That made them really open to Mussolini's message of national unity and strength.
Wow. So that's Mussolini. Now let's talk about Hitler. It's kind of interesting how his rise to power mirrors Mussolini's in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I mean, both of them used their country's post-war humiliation to gain political power.
Right.
Hitler, though, he was a master of propaganda. And his public speaking skills, oh man, those were top-notch.
Yeah.
He knew how to tap into that resentment that Germans felt after World War I. He convinced them that Germany was a victim, that they'd been betrayed by their own leaders and punished unfairly by the Treaty of Versailles.
But it wasn't just talk, right? Germany was facing real problems after the war.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The hyperinflation of the 1920s was just brutal. Millions of people were out of work. Everyone was desperate for change. And that's where Hitler came in. He promised to fix the economy, and he blamed all the problems on the Jews and the communists.
Yeah, it's scary how effective that kind of rhetoric can be.
It really is. And then you have the beer hall push in 1923. You'd think that failing to overthrow the government would be the end of a political career. But for Hitler, it actually made him more popular.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. He basically became a martyr while he was in prison.
Exactly.
It's interesting to me how both Hitler and Mussolini were obsessed with this idea of restoring their nations to some kind of former glory.
Right. That was a huge part of fascist ideology. They believed in national rebirth through things like authoritarianism, militarism, and expansionism.
Wow.
They thought war was the way to achieve greatness, and they weren't afraid to use violence and intimidation to get what they wanted.
Okay, so while all this is happening in Europe, on the other side of the world, you've got Japan with their own ambitions and resentments.
Yeah, Japan's story is pretty interesting, actually. For centuries, they've been completely isolated. But then, in the mid-1800s, the United States came along and forced them to open up to trade.
Yeah, those unequal treaties, right. I remember learning about that in school.
Yep, those treaties were a huge humiliation for Japan. They felt like the West was being imperialistic and that their sovereignty was being threatened. That resentment would stick with them for a long time.
Then you have the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, kind of like a David and Goliath story.
Totally.
Nobody thought this tiny island nation could defeat a major European power like Russia.
It shocked everyone, and it really boosted Japan's confidence on the world stage.
And they didn't waste any time taking advantage of that, did they?
Not at all. They annexed Korea and even grabbed some territory during World War I while everyone else was busy.
Right.
Their imperial ambitions were growing fast. They wanted resources, they wanted power, and they were determined to create their own empire in Asia.
But here's where things start to get a little shady. The videos talk about how Japan would stage incidents to justify invading China. Like, they claim that Chinese dissidents blew up a Japanese-owned railway in Manchuria. They called it the Mukden incident.
Oh, yeah, the Mukden incident.
Yeah.
That was a classic false flag operation. Historians pretty much agree that the Japanese military orchestrated the whole thing themselves.
So they were already planning to invade Manchuria, but they needed an excuse that would seem legitimate to the international community.
Exactly. It's something we see a lot throughout history, unfortunately. Countries making up reasons to go to war.
Yeah. That's pretty messed up.
And for Japan, the Mukden incident was really just the beginning of their expansion in Asia.
Wow.
Things were about to get a whole lot worse.
Okay, so we've got Germany, Italy, Japan, all on the rise, all with these big ambitions. What were the Allies doing during all this? Did they just sit back and watch?
Well, they were definitely worried. But remember, they'd just gone through World War I. They really wanted to avoid another war at all costs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they adopted this policy of appeasement. Basically, they tried to keep Hitler happy by giving him what he wanted, hoping that would, satisfy him and prevent another war.
But we all know how that turned out, right? It didn't exactly work.
Yeah, appeasement was a massive failure.
It's kind of crazy how they kept giving Hitler concessions, thinking he'd eventually just stop.
I know, right?
It seems so obvious now that it was just going to make him more aggressive.
Hindsight is 20/20, I guess. But yeah, every time they gave Hitler an inch, he took a mile.
So when did things really start to go downhill?
I think a key moment was the remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936. That was a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles.
Ah, so Hitler was already breaking the rules.
Yep. He was testing the waters, seeing how far he could push the Allies.
And what did the Allies do?
Nothing.
Really? Nothing at all?
They were concerned, but they didn't want to risk a war, so they just let him get away with it.
Wow, so that basically gave Hitler the green light to keep going.
Exactly. He saw that the Allies were weak, that they weren't willing to fight, and that emboldened him even more.
Then you have the Anschluss of Austria in 1938.
Oh, yeah. That was another big one.
Hitler just marched right in and took over the whole country.
It was a bloodless victory for him, just further proof that appeasement wasn't working.
The real turning point, I think, was the Sudetenland crisis.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where the Allies really showed their weakness.
They basically gave Hitler a part of Czechoslovakia in exchange for his promise of peace.
Talk about a bad deal.
It was a desperate attempt to avoid war, but it just backfired spectacularly.
Yeah, because Hitler broke his promise almost immediately, didn't he?
Within months, he took over the rest of Czechoslovakia.
So appeasement was officially dead.
Pretty much. It was clear that Hitler couldn't be trusted. And that the Allies were going to have to take a stand eventually.
So while Hitler's busy expanding his empire in Europe, what's Mussolini up to?
Well, Mussolini's got his own ambitions. He invades Ethiopia in 1935.
Ethiopia? Why Ethiopia?
He wanted colonial glory, basically. and revenge for a previous defeat against Ethiopia.
It's kind of funny how different Hitler and Mussolini were in their approaches.
Yeah.
Hitler was all about these carefully planned maneuvers.
Right.
And Mussolini was just kind of impulsive.
Like he just decided to invade Ethiopia on a whim.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to believe those two ended up as allies.
Their methods were different, for sure. But their goals were similar. They both wanted to expand their territories, build up their militaries, and create their own empires.
So basically, they were both contributing to the growing instability in Europe.
Exactly. Pushing the world closer and closer to war.
And meanwhile, you've got Japan doing their own thing in Asia.
Right.
They were pretty brutal in their conquest of China.
Yeah. The Nanking Massacre was a horrific event. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians were murdered or raped by Japanese troops.
It's a stark reminder of how terrible war can be.
It really is.
These atrocities shouldn't be forgotten.
Agreed. They serve as a warning about the dangers of unchecked aggression and the importance of standing up for human rights.
Okay, so it's 1939. Germany and Italy formalized their alliance with the Pact of Steel.
Yeah. The Pact of Steel was a big deal.
What did it mean for the balance of power in Europe?
It created a powerful military bloc, one that directly threatened the existing order.
So the stakes were getting higher.
Definitely.
And then Hitler demands the Polish corridor, that strip of land that separated East Prussia from the rest of Germany. This is where the Allies finally decided to draw a line in the sand, right?
They did. They guaranteed Poland's independence.
Yeah.
And they were finally ready to back up their words with action.
So they knew this could mean war.
They did. But they were willing to risk it to stop Hitler.
Wow, things were getting really serious.
And then, just when you thought things couldn't get any more complicated, the Nazi-Soviet pact happened.
Wait, what? Hitler and Stalin made a pact, but they hated each other.
I know, right? It shocked the entire world.
That's insane.
It was a brilliant move by Hitler, though. It secured his eastern border so he could focus on conquering Western Europe.
So that's where things really start to shift, huh?
Yeah, the map of Europe was about to be redrawn, and the world was on the brink of a war unlike any it had ever seen.
All right, so we've got Germany allied with the Soviet Union. They're ready to go. Britain and France are, well, they're trying to figure out what to do. So what happened next? Did the war just start immediately?
Well, not quite. You might be surprised to hear that there was actually a period of relative calm at the beginning of the war.
Really?
Yeah, they called it the phony war. Basically, both sides were just kind of waiting for the other to make a move.
So after all that buildup, it was just silence.
It might seem that way, but there was actually a lot going on behind the scenes. Both sides were mobilizing their forces, getting ready for a full-scale conflict.
Ah, okay. The videos mentioned that France had this really outdated military strategy, like they were still using horses and stuff.
Oh yeah, France was stuck in the past. They were thinking about war in terms of World War I. Big static defenses, slow-moving armies. They weren't ready for what Germany was about to throw at them.
And what was that?
Blitzkrieg.
Blitzkrieg.
It means lightning war.
Ah, so it was fast.
Incredibly fast and coordinated. They used tanks, aircraft, infantry, all working together. The goal was to break through enemy lines and just create chaos.
So it wasn't just about brute force then?
No, it was about speed and surprise, hitting the enemy hard and fast before they could even react.
And the French just weren't ready for that?
Nope. They had this huge line of fortifications along their border with Germany, the Maginot Line, but they left a big gap in the Ardennes forest.
They didn't think the Germans could get tanks through there.
That's right.
But they did.
They sure did. It was a huge miscalculation by the French. The Germans poured through the Ardennes and quickly surrounded Allied forces in Belgium and northern France.
Oof, that's not good. And that's what led to the evacuation at Dunkirk, right?
Exactly. They managed to rescue a lot of troops from the beaches.
That was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
It was a miracle.
But they lost a lot of equipment and men?
Yeah. It was a major setback for the Allies, and France would soon fall, leaving Britain to fight on alone.
Talk about a tough spot to be in. But the British people didn't give up, did they?
No, they didn't. Churchill was a huge part of that.
Yeah, his speeches were so inspiring.
He really rallied the nation. He told them they would never surrender, that they would fight on the beaches, in the fields, in the streets, everywhere.
Powerful stuff.
It was.
So Hitler tried to invade Britain next.
He did. But first, he launched the Battle of Britain. He wanted to destroy the Royal Air Force so that he could invade without any resistance from the air.
That sounds intense.
It was. The Luftwaffe, Germany's Air Force, bombed British cities day and night. They called it the Blitz.
The Blitz, right?
It was terrifying for the British people.
I can't even imagine what it was like to live through that.
But they were incredibly resilient. They built bomb shelters, carried on with their lives as best they could.
Keep calm and carry on.
Exactly.
But the real heroes of the Battle of Britain were the RAF pilots, right?
Absolutely. They were outnumbered.
Yeah.
But they fought with incredible skill and courage.
And they won.
They did. They inflicted heavy losses on the Luftwaffe, and Hitler was forced to abandon his invasion plans.
That's amazing.
It was a turning point in the war.
So Hitler's plan to conquer Britain failed. What did he do next?
He turned his attention to the east, to the Soviet Union.
He was going to invade Russia.
Yep. In June 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history.
Wow. That's a bold move.
It was a huge gamble. He was hoping to defeat the Soviet Union before winter set in.
Did it work?
At first, it seemed like it might. The German army advanced quickly, but the Soviets were tougher than Hitler expected. They fought back hard, and the Russian winter was brutal. The Germans weren't prepared for it at all.
So the invasion stalled.
It did. Operation Barbarossa turned into a long, bloody war of attrition.
And while all of this was happening in Europe, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that was a big turning point, too.
It brought the United States into the war.
Exactly. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a devastating blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet, but it also woke up a sleeping giant.
I guess you could say that Japan really messed up with that one.
They did. The American people were outraged, and the U.S. government was determined to fight back.
So the war expanded even further.
It did, and the balance of power shifted decisively in favor of the Allies.
So in the end, the Allies won?
They did, but it was a long and difficult fight. Millions of people died, and the world was changed forever.
It's hard to believe that all of this happened less than a century ago.
I know. It's a reminder of how fragile peace can be and how important it is to learn from the mistakes of the past.
Absolutely. Well, that was a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for taking us through it.
My pleasure.
We've seen how quickly things can escalate, how dangerous unchecked ambition can be, and how important it is to stand up to tyranny.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, let's dive into this. The Cold War. From what I can see, we're going with the oversimplified approach.
Yeah, looks like it. Should be fun.
I like their stuff. A good way to get a big picture view, especially with a topic this huge.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking for those key moments, the big players, the things that really made this whole decades-long standoff matter.
Exactly. The Cold War might seem like ancient history.
Yeah.
But it's really not. I mean, it shaped the world we're living in right now.
For sure.
So understanding it can help us make sense of all the geopolitical stuff happening today.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's rewind the clock all the way back to 1917. World War I is raging on.
Yeah.
Germany's kind of desperate, looking for any way to shake things up on the Eastern Front. And they make this gamble, right? They send Lenin back to Russia after years in exile.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're hoping to drop a political stink bomb.
Oh, right. Create some chaos.
Weaken Russia's war effort.
Yeah. Backfires spectacularly, though.
Right. It does.
Big time. Instead of just chaos, you get the Bolshevik Revolution.
Wow.
Leads to the birth of the Soviet Union, a communist superpower that would go on to challenge the U.S.
Yeah, you're talking about a single event that really set off a chain reaction.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of chain reactions, got to talk about Stalin.
Yeah.
Takes over after Lenin. And, sources don't paint a pretty picture.
Brutal and paranoid are like the nicest words you could use.
Yeah.
Purged anyone he saw as a threat. Created this culture of fear, repression within the Soviet Union.
And that paranoia really seeped into Soviet policy.
Oh, for sure. Fostered this deep mistrust of the West. And you can see how it really fueled the Cold War.
Okay, but here's the thing. All this is going down as World War II is ending. You'd think, right?
Yeah.
There'd be this sense of relief, global unity. We just defeated fascism.
Right.
But the conferences between the Allied leaders, the U.S., U.K., the Soviets, already so much tension.
Yeah, you can see the seeds of mistrust already there. Each side, different visions for the post-war world. Conflicting ideologies, it's all there, ready to become the fault lines of the Cold War.
And then 1946, Churchill gives that Iron Curtain speech.
Yeah, such a powerful image, really captures that sense of Europe being split in two.
Like a dividing line.
Right, physically and ideologically.
Yeah.
You have the Soviet Union and its satellite states in the East, all communist, and then the West, led by the U.S., promoting democracy and capitalism. It's this stark division, and it shaped geopolitics for decades.
Totally. And Stalin's not just sitting back watching this happen.
No.
He's moving fast, consolidating his control over Eastern Europe.
Yeah, installs puppet governments, establishes that buffer zone.
All that fear of the West.
Driving his every move, protecting himself, creating that sphere of influence, a barrier against perceived threats.
And then, bam, one of the first flashpoints.
Yeah.
The Berlin blockade, 1948.
Soviets cut off all land access to West Berlin. It's like holding the city hostage.
Trying to squeeze the Western powers out.
Yeah, high stakes for sure. Real brinkmanship.
But the U.S. and its allies respond with, an incredible resolve, right?
Yeah.
The Berlin airlift.
Yeah.
For over a year, they airlifted supplies.
They kept the city alive.
Amazing. Defying The Soviets.
It showed how far each side was willing to go to assert their dominance.
Absolutely. And then just a year later, 1949, the Soviets test their first atomic bomb.
Game changer. Right. That was the moment. Shattered the U.S. monopoly on nuclear weapons.
Suddenly the stakes are exponentially higher.
Oh, yeah. The world steps into the nuclear age.
Chilling to think about.
Yeah.
And so as we move into the 1950s, the Cold War goes global. We start seeing these proxy wars popping up.
Yeah, it's a way for the superpowers to fight indirectly, supporting different sides in these regional wars.
Without directly going head to head.
Right. It's dangerous, though. Fuels instability, and you see a lot of bloodshed around the world.
And a perfect example of that, the Korean War, kicks off in 1950.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just this tragic illustration of the human cost of these ideological proxy wars.
Absolutely. Brutal back and forth fighting. Communist North, backed by the Soviets and China, against the South, supported by the U.S. and the UN.
Millions of casualties.
Yeah. And a divided peninsula, a legacy that we're still dealing with today.
And it's interesting, in the sources I've seen, the leaders, Kim Il-sung and Syngman Rhee, they're described as like these sweet-looking old men.
Right.
It's almost absurd considering the brutality they unleashed.
Appearances can be deceiving for sure.
Yeah.
Personal ambition, ideology, it can drive people to do terrible things.
No matter how harmless they might seem.
Right.
And so Korea really cemented this idea of the Cold War as a global struggle. And it wasn't just Asia. Things were heating up right on America's doorstep.
Cuba.
Yeah, Fidel Castro.
His communist revolution in '59, that was a shock to the U.S. system.
A communist regime 90 miles from Florida.
Yeah, allied with the Soviets, it's seen as a direct threat, to U.S. security and their interests in the region.
And the Bay of Pigs invasion in '61 just made things worse.
Oh, yeah. A huge embarrassment for the U.S.
Pushed Castro even closer to the Soviets.
And then it sets the stage for one of the most dangerous moments in history, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Things are about to get real intense.
All right.
1962, U.S. spy planes find Soviet missiles in Cuba. Nuclear missiles.
Capable of hitting U.S. cities within minutes.
Heart-stopping, right?
It was sheer terror for the U.S. Suddenly a nuclear attack felt very real.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile peace can be.
And the devastating power of these weapons. But this raises a crucial question. How did we get to this point? What pushed Khrushchev to make such a move?
Okay, that's a great question, and one we're definitely going to dig into. But for now, let's just take a minute to process everything.
Yeah.
We've seen the Cold War's roots in the aftermath of World War I, the ideological split in Europe, the rise of Stalin, the Berlin blockade, nuclear weapons, proxy wars like Korea. It's a lot, but it gives you a sense of how complex this all was.
Incredibly high stakes, too.
Yeah, and this is just scratching the surface.
We've got a lot more to unpack, including that nail-biting Cuban Missile Crisis. So stick with us. Things are about to get even more interesting. And can you imagine seeing those photos? Soviet missiles in Cuba. Talk about a wake-up call for the U.S.
Definitely not the kind of morning coffee you want to be having.
It was a direct challenge, to U.S. dominance. And it brought the world incredibly close to nuclear war. But to understand Khrushchev's thinking, you got to look at what was going on. Remember, the U.S. had put nuclear missiles in Turkey.
Right on the Soviet border.
Just the year before.
So the Soviets saw this as like tit for tat.
Exactly. Leveling the playing field. It was about power, showing the U.S. they weren't the only ones who could threaten the other's homeland. But it also shows you there was some insecurity in the Soviet system.
Interesting.
Like Khrushchev maybe felt he had to prove Soviet strength, especially after the U.S. seemed to be pulling ahead, like with Sputnik and Gagarin in space.
Right, those were big wins for the U.S. in the space race. So, okay, back to those missiles. Kennedy's facing this immediate threat. What can he even do? Can't just ignore it.
Oh, ignoring it was not an option, but going in with a full-on military strike. Too risky.
Yeah, way too risky.
So Kennedy gets his advisors together, days of debate, weighing the options, trying to figure out what to do, and they finally decide on a naval blockade.
A quarantine zone around Cuba.
Trying to stop the Soviets from bringing in more stuff.
That feels like walking a tightrope, doesn't it? Strong message, but could also make things way worse.
It was super tense. The world held its breath for 13 days in October '62, just watching, waiting, two superpowers staring each other down.
With their fingers on the button.
Literally.
Yeah.
There are all these stories, close calls during those 13 days.
The one that gets me every time is Vasily Arkhipov, that Soviet submarine officer.
Oh, yeah.
He might have single-handedly prevented a nuclear war.
It shows you individual courage, clear thinking, even when things are crazy. Imagine, you're on a Soviet submarine and a U.S. destroyer is trying to force you to surface.
Near Cuba.
Right. The sub-captain thinks war has started. He's ready to launch a nuke. But Arkhipov, he's second in command, refuses.
Wow. Just one person's decision deep in the ocean could have changed everything. What if he wasn't there?
Right. What if he'd said yes? It's a lot to think about. The Cuban Missile Crisis, it was a wake-up call for everyone.
Looking into the abyss.
Seeing what nuclear war could really mean.
And then both sides back down. After those long 13 days, they reach a deal. Soviets pull their missiles out of Cuba. The U.S. secretly agrees to take theirs out of Turkey.
A fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. And this is what leads to détente. Things start to thaw between the superpowers.
So we see arms control agreements.
Yeah.
Like the Limited Test Ban Treaty in '63.
Right. No more testing nukes in the atmosphere, underwater, outer space.
Okay, so a step back from the edge. But the rivalry isn't over. Does the nature of the conflict change during this détente period?
Totally. They realize going head-to-head is too dangerous, so the focus shifts to proxy wars.
Ah, okay.
Competing for influence and control without risking, the end of the world.
Right. So we talked about Korea, but there were so many other proxy wars in this era.
Oh, yeah.
Vietnam, obviously, but also the Middle East, Africa, Latin America. It's like the whole world becomes a stage for the Cold War.
Absolutely. And it had devastating consequences for so many countries caught in the middle.
And it's not just ideology driving these proxy wars, right?
No, it's about resources, strategy, access to markets. The Cold War was complicated, lots of competing interests, all tangled up together.
Makes you wonder what the world would be like if the Cold War hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Speaking of complicated, the sources mention something about lost nuclear bombs, that the U.S. has lost at least 11 nukes since 1950.
Some were never even recovered.
That's a scary thought. Even with détente, the threat was still there.
Oh, yeah. Nuclear annihilation was always a possibility. On top of that, you had these proxy wars raging all over the place.
A lot of uncertainty and anxiety, I imagine. The Cold War cast a long shadow.
It influenced everything. International relations, domestic politics, even pop culture. And as we head into the 1970s, this pattern continues. Détente alongside these proxy conflicts and that constant nuclear threat.
Now, the sources mention ABMs, MIRVs, and MAN-D. It sounds like they were key to the nuclear arms race at this point. Can you break those down for us? What are they and how do they affect things?
Okay, so ABMs are anti-ballistic missiles. Basically, they're meant to shoot down incoming nukes.
Sounds like a game changer.
They were seen as a way to defend against a nuclear attack, but developing them just fueled the arms race even more, each side trying to come up with better weapons to get past the other's defenses.
So it's like an arms race within the arms race.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got MIRVs, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. Basically, it's a bunch of nuclear warheads on one missile.
Each one can hit a different target.
Right. MIRVs made nuclear arsenals way more destructive. The thought of a nuclear war was even more horrifying.
And MID, that's the idea of mutually assured destruction.
Right. If both sides knew they'd be completely wiped out in a nuclear war, they wouldn't start one.
It's a scary logic, but I guess it prevented things from going too far.
It probably did. It was a huge gamble, though, with the fate of humanity at stake. But even with all this, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, they were both having problems at home.
Right.
By the late 70s, the Soviet economy was really struggling. All that military spending was taking its toll. And the U.S., after Vietnam, was dealing with economic woes and a loss of public trust.
Cracks in the facade.
Exactly. And they were only going to get bigger in the 1980s.
Sounds like things are about to change again. What happens next?
Well, in 1979, the Soviets invade Afghanistan, trying to support a communist regime that was having problems. But it ends up being their own Vietnam. Costly, ultimately unsuccessful. It strained relations with the West even more.
Not a good move.
No. And it had lasting consequences. This move really fueled Islamic militancy in the region.
So how did the U.S. react to all of this?
Well, President Carter condemned the invasion and put sanctions on the Soviet Union. But it was Reagan, after he came into office in '81, who really turned up the heat, called the Soviet Union an evil empire, increased military spending, started his Star Wars program.
That was about creating a missile defense system in space, right?
Yeah, super ambitious, technologically challenging. A lot of people thought it was a bad idea.
So the 1980s start with this renewed Cold War tension. Feels like everyone's on edge again.
Definitely. But meanwhile, things were shifting inside the Soviet Union. A new leader was about to step onto the world stage.
Someone who'd challenged the very foundation of the Soviet system.
That's right. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev takes over, and he's going to bring some serious change, both inside the Soviet Union and on the world stage. His policies, glasnost and perestroika, are going to have huge consequences. They'll ultimately lead to the end of the Cold War. But, well, that's a story for part 3 of our deep dive.
Okay, so final chapter. Gorbachev, 1985. He takes over the Soviet Union. He's often called, the guy who ended the Cold War.
Right, but like we were saying, it's not that simple.
Yeah, way more to it. So what made him so different? Let's start with glasnost and perestroika. What were those all about?
Well, Gorbachev, he kind of inherited a system that was, well, falling apart. The Soviet economy was a mess. People were unhappy. The arms race, it had drained them.
Yeah.
He knew something had to change. Glasnost and perestroika, that was his answer.
Okay, so glasnost.
Yeah.
That means openness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So he's trying to, like, loosen up control and information, allow more free speech.
That's the idea. He realized that all that censorship, all that repression, it was stifling creativity, holding them back. He thought, let people speak freely, debate, have access to information, revitalize Soviet society.
A pretty radical shift for a system that was all about control. And perestroika, that was about the economy.
Yeah, restructuring the Soviet economy.
Yeah.
Bringing in some elements of market economics, decentralizing control, encouraging people to take initiative.
Sounds like a big change.
It was. He wanted to make the Soviet economy more efficient, more competitive.
But I bet those reforms, along with glasnost, had some unexpected side effects.
You got it. Opening up the system, even a little bit, unleashed forces Gorbachev couldn't really control.
People started pushing for more.
Exactly. Questioning the whole system. Those cracks that had always been there, they just blew wide open.
And nowhere was that more clear than in Eastern Europe. The fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989, I mean, that image, it's iconic.
Oh, absolutely. For decades, the Berlin Wall was like the symbol of the Iron Curtain.
Dividing East and West.
Keeping families and friends apart. And then suddenly it's gone. It was a moment of pure joy, not just for Germans, but for everyone in Eastern Europe who wanted freedom.
It's amazing to picture that. People just chipping away at that wall. But did Gorbachev make that happen? Like, did he decide to just let the Soviet Empire collapse?
That's a tough question. He didn't order the wall to be torn down, but his policies, they made it inevitable. He didn't send in the military to stop the protests. Not like what happened in Hungary in '56 or Czechoslovakia in '68.
So he saw what was happening and decided not to fight it. That's a big deal for a Soviet leader.
It was. But you also have to understand, he was under a lot of pressure. The economy was a wreck. Ethnic tensions were rising. The whole system was unsustainable. He was trying to reform it without destroying it.
A tough balancing act. And then you have Boris Yeltsin coming onto the scene, shaking things up even more. He was like a rival to Gorbachev.
Yeah. Yeltsin, he was charismatic, ambitious. He wanted change, and he wanted it fast. He became the first elected president of the Russian Republic.
Challenging Gorbachev's authority.
Absolutely. He wanted more autonomy for Russia within the Soviet Union.
So you have this powder keg.
Yeah.
And then 1991, boom, the coup.
Yeah.
Hardline communists try to take over. It's like a step backwards, right?
It was a desperate move. The old guard, they were clinging to power. They saw Gorbachev's reforms as a threat. They put him under house arrest, tried to grab control.
But they messed with the wrong guy. Yeltsin wasn't backing down.
Nope. He stood up to them, rallied the people. The coup fell apart quickly, but it really weakened Gorbachev. It was the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union.
And then just a few months later, December 1991, the Soviet flag comes down. It's over.
This superpower, a rival to the U.S. for almost 50 years, just gone. Like that.
It's hard to believe. The end of an era. But what happens next? What does the world look like without the Cold War?
A lot of questions, right? What about the former Soviet republics? What about Russia?
What about the threat of nuclear war? We've come a long way from those early days of the Soviet Union. All that tension, those close calls.
It's a reminder that history is full of surprises. The Cold War could have ended very differently. But it didn't. People made choices. Individuals acted with courage. Leaders pulled back from the brink.
It gives you hope, right? Even when things seem impossible, there's always a chance for a better future. But like you said before, the end of the Cold War wasn't a fairy tale ending.
Yeah, we still face a lot of the same problems. Struggles for power, the threat of nuclear weapons, new ideologies, new conflicts.
So where do we go from here? What have we learned from all of this?
For me, it's a reminder to stay informed, to be engaged, to think critically. Don't take peace for granted. Support those who are working for peace. Remember, the choices we make today, they shape the future.
Well said.
We're going to tackle the Cold War.
Ooh, big topic.
Yeah, it really is. We'll be using those oversimplified history videos as our guide.
I love those videos. They're hilarious.
They are. And surprisingly detailed, too.
You wouldn't think so with all those, stick figures.
Right. But you actually learn a lot. We're going to uncover stuff you might have missed.
That's good.
This is just part one, though, focusing on the early years. So much to unpack.
It all starts with that post-World War I Europe. Think about it.
Yeah.
You have resentment, all these unfulfilled ambitions floating around, and radical ideologies are on the rise.
especially in those countries who felt kind of cheated by the peace treaties.
Exactly. It's a recipe for disaster, like a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
And that spark was, well, the rise of fascism.
Oh, yeah.
We see it happen in Italy, in Germany, economic turmoil mixed with a desire for strong leadership. It's fascinating how similar Mussolini and Hitler's paths were.
Both of them, masters at exploiting their nation's post-war humiliation. They knew exactly how to tap into that resentment and frustration.
And offering, of course, simplistic solutions to very complex problems.
Oh, always. Mussolini starts as a socialist, then morphs into this fascist dictator. He promises to bring Italy back to its former glory.
Yeah, preying on those anxieties left over from the war. But shifting gears a bit to Hitler, knowing what we know now, could appeasement ever have worked with him?
The appeasement debate. Historians still argue about this one.
It makes sense, though. The Allies didn't want another war.
Of course, another devastating war was the last thing anyone wanted. But by giving Hitler concessions, it sort of signaled weakness. And that only emboldened him.
Like when he remilitarized the Rhineland back in '36, that was a chance to draw a line and say no further.
Definitely a missed opportunity. And then came Austria in '38. Just walks right in, another bloodless victory. That's when it became clear this wasn't just about revising treaties for Hitler.
It was about expansion, a greater German Reich.
Exactly. And then, of course, the Sudetenland crisis. The Allies, desperate to avoid war, caved and gave Hitler a piece of Czechoslovakia.
Hoping he'd be satisfied.
A desperate gamble that totally backfired.
Big time. Okay, so while Europe's dealing with all of this, on the other side of the world, a similar story is unfolding in Japan. This one's about ambition and resentment, too.
Japan had been isolating for centuries. Then in the mid-1800s, the U.S. forces them open to trade. And the unequal treaties they had to sign, that became a huge source of humiliation.
It's interesting how those historical grievances can shape a nation's path.
Absolutely. Japan saw Western imperialism as a threat. And when they won the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, their confidence soared.
They realized they could play on the world stage.
Exactly. Their desire for resources, for regional dominance, it all grew. But they didn't always play fair. To justify pushing into China, they'd stage incidents, like the Mukden incident in 1931.
Ah, yes, the Mukden incident. Talk about a false flag operation. They blamed Chinese dissidents for blowing up a Japanese railway and used that as a pretext to invade Manchuria. Makes you wonder, how often does that happen? Nations creating their own justifications for war.
It's a disturbing thought, and it's not limited to just Japan. We see those tactics throughout history, even today.
It highlights why critical thinking is so important, questioning narratives, especially during conflicts. So we've got these three major players, Germany, Italy, and Japan, all with these expansionist goals, and their tactics are getting more aggressive. Appeasement had failed, and Hitler, emboldened, decides on his most audacious move, the invasion of Poland in 1939.
And that's when we see Blitzkrieg, lightning war, for the first time. It was a completely new way of fighting. Tanks, aircraft, infantry, all coordinated in a rapid assault. The Polish army, they just couldn't keep up.
Their tactics, their equipment, all outdated. What made Blitzkrieg so revolutionary? It seems like it caught everyone off guard.
It completely changed the idea of warfare. No more slow, static trench warfare. Blitzkrieg was all about speed, surprise, overwhelming force. The Allies, they were stuck in the past, and they paid the price.
Poland falls, sending shockwaves through Europe. A clear sign of German might. Then comes the phony war. Everyone waiting, knowing the real clash is inevitable.
But behind the scenes, everything's in motion. Troops are being deployed, strategies are being developed, the world's about to change. That calm was just the calm before the storm.
And when that storm hit France, well, they weren't ready for it.
Not at all. They were still stuck in the past, holding on to those World War I doctrines, the Maginot Line, like they were fighting the wrong war.
Yeah, and that whole thing about the Ardennes forest, they thought it was impassable for tanks. Big mistake.
Huge mistake. The Germans, though, they saw it as an opportunity. They were masters of maneuver warfare, adaptable, audacious.
So they just bypassed the French defenses completely?
Right through the Ardennes, yeah, completely caught the French off guard. Brilliant strategy, really, but devastating for the French.
Outmaneuvered, encircled, even though they had more troops?
Numbers didn't matter much against Blitzkrieg. Speed and coordination, that's what won the day.
Dunkirk must have been something else.
A miracle, really. Over 300,000 Allied troops rescued right off the beaches under constant bombardment. Talk about courage and resilience.
It's incredible, saving so many lives, but they lost so much equipment.
A huge setback, no doubt. France falls, leaving Britain all alone against the Nazis.
But they didn't give up. They were ready to fight for their homeland. The Battle of Britain, that had to be an intense moment in the war.
Oh, absolutely. Air power against air power. Luftwaffe versus the RAF, the fate of Britain hanging in the balance.
So Hitler's plan was to just take out the RAF completely.
That was the idea. Destroy the RAF, clear the way for an invasion. He launched bombing raids day and night, targeting anything and everything.
Factories, airfields, cities, trying to crush their spirit, the Blitz. Right, that must have been terrifying for civilians.
Imagine that, living with that constant threat, never knowing when or where the next bomb might fall.
But they held on. They didn't break. Churchill's speeches, those must have helped.
Definitely he rallied the nation. We shall fight on the beaches, you know the one. That spirit of defiance, it was everywhere.
Gave them the strength to keep going. And the RAF pilots, they were outnumbered, but man, they held their own.
Skilled, determined, incredibly brave. They inflicted heavy losses on the Luftwaffe through a wrench in Hitler's plans.
Turning point in the war, wouldn't you say? Stopping that invasion, buying the Allies valuable time.
Absolutely a turning point. The first major defeat for Hitler. Proof that he could be beaten. And it showcased the importance of air power. That was clear.
Air power and human resilience. But even with this victory, Hitler was already looking for his next target. And well, he set his sights on the Soviet Union.
Operation Barbarossa, June 1941, the largest land invasion in history. Hitler gambling again, and this time it was a gamble he would lose.
He underestimated the Soviets, didn't he?
Completely. The sheer size of the Soviet Union, the tenacity of the Red Army, and the Russian winter, brutal. The German army wasn't prepared for any of it.
That Eastern Front, I read about it, it was horrific.
A meat grinder. Millions lost their lives in that fighting. The horrors of ideological conflict on full display. And it wasn't just Europe. The war. It kept expanding, pulling more and more nations into the fight.
Then came Pearl Harbor.
December 7th, 1941. A surprise attack that changed everything.
Devastating for the U.S. Pacific Fleet and for the American people.
A shock, no doubt. But it also galvanized them, brought the U.S. into the war. Japan had awakened a sleeping giant.
It really did become a global conflict then. Europe, Asia, the Pacific, battles everywhere. The world had never seen anything like it.
In the aftermath, it's hard to even comprehend. Millions dead, cities destroyed, the world completely transformed by the horrors of war.
And it's from those ashes that the Cold War rises.
The Allied victory, it was a hard-fought victory, but it didn't bring the peace everyone had hoped for. Instead, a new struggle emerged, a new kind of conflict.
The U.S. and the Soviet Union, from allies to rivals. And that's a story for our final part. We'll dive into the rise of the Iron Curtain, the nuclear arms race, and the beginning of a rivalry that would shape the world for decades to come. So, we've seen the lead up to World War II, the devastation, the global conflict, but even with the Allied victory, peace didn't exactly follow, did it?
Not quite. Instead, we got a new kind of struggle, a clash of ideologies, the Cold War.
It's amazing the U.S. and Soviet Union partners in the war, but such different systems. How did that alliance even work during the war? And I guess, what caused it to break down?
Well, it was a fragile alliance for sure. More out of necessity than shared values.
Yeah.
They had to work together to beat the Nazis. But under the surface, there were so many cracks. Disagreements about post-war borders, the future of Germany.
And don't forget the spread of communism.
Exactly. That was a huge concern for the West. The Yalta Conference in 1945, that was a key moment. The big three, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, trying to figure out the post-war world.
And the Soviets ended up with a lot of influence in Eastern Europe, right? That had to worry the West.
It did. It fueled fears of Soviet expansionism. But Yalta is controversial. Some say it was a necessary compromise to keep the Soviets on board, for the war effort and for the UN.
Others say it was a betrayal of Eastern European nations, kind of leaving them at the mercy of the Soviets.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Looking back, Yalta definitely cast a long shadow. It widened the gap between East and West and set the stage for the Cold War. And then on top of all that, we have the dawn of the nuclear age.
Hiroshima, Nagasaki, August 1945. The world saw the terrifying power of these new weapons. What a moment in history. Suddenly humanity could destroy itself. How did that impact the Cold War?
It changed everything. The U.S. had the bomb first, but in 1949, the Soviets tested their own, shifted the balance of power completely.
And that kicked off the arms race, didn't it? A competition to build more and more destructive weapons. The stakes couldn't have been higher.
That's for sure. The threat of nuclear war, it loomed over everything. The idea of mutually assured destruction, MAD, kept both sides in check, in theory.
Terrifying logic. But it also led to a massive buildup of nuclear arsenals, both sides trying to one-up each other.
And all across Europe, the Iron Curtain descended, dividing the continent in two. Each side suspicious of the other, fueled by propaganda, espionage. It was a tense time.
And the Cold War went beyond military standoffs, didn't it? It was this global ideological struggle. Proxy wars, espionage, trying to win over hearts and minds. The whole world felt the impact.
It influenced everything. Foreign policy, military spending, scientific advancements, even pop culture. It was a defining era. dangerous, but also a time of incredible innovation.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Cold War, what are the big takeaways for our listeners?
Well, it's important to remember all the forces at play. The rise of fascism, the devastation of World War II, that ideological divide between East and West, and the human cost, so many lives lost, that constant fear of nuclear war. It's something we should never forget.
The Cold War really shows us that history is all about choices, and the consequences, sometimes unintended, can last for generations. Diplomacy, dialogue, those things are crucial.
Absolutely. And even though the Cold War is over, its legacy lives on, shaping the world we live in today. By learning from the past, we can try to make better choices, create a more peaceful future.
A powerful message to end on.